This past weekend, I hosted a retreat for over 90 participants, and it was a virtual retreat. During the retreat, we had several presentations, and one of them was done by Shannon Way of SleighArt, who is a certified legit kits teacher. She showed us what we needed to know about getting started in paper piecing. So here's her presentation. I hope you enjoy it.
All
Okay,
right.
so
Yeah.
everybody, I have my special guest, second special guest today, Shannon Way of SleighArt, who is just recently a certified instructor for Legit Kits. If you don't know what Legit Kits are, I'm sure she will tell you about it, but it is paper piecing. She is the queen of paper piecing, as far as I'm concerned, and she's going to tell us everything that we need to know to get into this, because I know it's a bit of a mystery for some people. I am one of those people as well. So, Shannon, we are all yours. Welcome.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen and do some technology stuff. I've I have the presentation, but I also have it as a PDF. So we're going to see which one works. And I'm going to go ahead and try this now and see what it lets me do. Let's see if it's going to let me do this. Doesn't look like. Aha, there we go. All right. If anybody or Stephen, if you could, let me know if you can see it because I can't actually see anybody anymore doing it this way.
It's full screen. Looks good.
Excellent. Okay. So as Stephen said, we're going to talk a little bit about the essentials of FPP. But what I want to, at the beginning, let everybody know is this is kind of the essentials of FPP through my lens of how I came about discovering and falling in love with foundation paper piecing. For anybody that doesn't know that that's what FPP stands for. What I've learned about it and what I'm continuing to learn and what I'm hoping to share with folks as I start becoming a certified instructor and continue my journey with this specific quilt technique. So it is through the lens of my own personal view. If you have learned a different way and you have become very comfortable with that way, I am 1,000% on board with that, and I'm very excited about that. And I hope at some point you'll share some of the tips and tricks you may have as well, because I'm always looking for things to bring into my own kind of artist portfolio. But again, this is kind of through my lens. So we're going to dive in. We're going to talk a little bit today. I'm going to give a brief introduction about myself and how I started getting into quilting, look a little bit at the evolution of foundation paper piecing, and then look at the evolution of the FPPer from a beginner through the sky's the limit. And then, as Stephen said at the end, I will take some questions and hopefully give very thoughtful answers. All right. So, as a part of my introduction, I'm Shannon Way, and yes, I am officially now one of just 8 Legit Kits certified instructors across the United States. I say across the United States, but I think the furthest west we have is Utah. There's a few East Coasters, many Midwest, and one from Utah. I just got back very recently from Oklahoma City, where from this photo, took part in a boot camp to become a certified instructor to learn more the business side of it because they expected us to know how to put together legit kits. Legit kits are foundation paper piecing, but they're from a different point of view than traditional foundation paper piecing. They are more of a artist's take, where a beginner artist would start doing grids of drawing subjects, and that's how the person that Mike Odell, who created Legit Kits, started looking at foundation paper piecing. So it's a little bit different, but today is not specifically about Legit Kits. While I'm super proud to be one of those few certified instructors, I'm equally proud to be well versed in just foundation paper piecing as a whole portion of quilting in the quilting world. I started quilting. As we were talking about earlier, I'm a quilter who started in the middle of the pandemic, though I did miss the mask making craze. I started too late. I don't have the numbers of masks that many of you may have made in my past, but I did start during the pandemic, and I fell in love with traditional piecing. I love traditional quilts and the history and the story that they tell. But I quickly discovered foundation paper piecing and really fell in love with the precision, the artistry, the angles and subjects that you can create within foundation paper piecing that is either impossible to do with traditional piecing or would have to be done with things that I don't like to do, which is hand sewing and applique and things. And I was just not gonna, I was gonna stay away from that. So foundation paper piecing fit very well with what I was looking to do and excited to learn about. I let's see. Very cool. Today, again, talking about the essentials of foundation paper piecing. We'll be kind of walking through how it all began from in the 17th and 18th century, just touch a little bit on the history of it, and then we'll take a look at the tools that you may need, may want, may look at as my self-appointed gadget gal. I do enjoy those gadgets as you progress from very baby beginner all the way through an FPP rock star. So let's take a look. The evolution, let me see if I can move this. There we go. The evolution of FPP. Foundation paper piecing really started, is not new, or foundation piecing rather, is not a new quilting technique. There were some evidence of foundation piecing, ancient examples using materials well in like, pharaoh times and things like that. But most of the surviving evidence now in museums and things of that nature are from the 17th and 18th century, where scraps of clothing, linens, really anything that the often woman was trying to give continued life to, or factory workers, things like that, they would put on a material of some kind to build a stronger foundation, hence foundation piecing. It wasn't until the 19th and 20th century, as quilters, as a very resourceful bunch, were interested in giving those materials continued life. We're also very much interested in being artists and looking at ways to play with the images that we receive in our everyday lives and how we could represent those in our quilts. And so things like Quilt as You Go and English paper piecing, and of course foundation paper piecing, were born from that desire to be not only functional but also very artsy and just fun, rather than just the functionality part of it. For the evolution of yourself as an FPPer, I always recommend starting simple. You want to start somewhere, maybe not even with an FPP pattern, so that you can kind of start building the muscle memory of what foundation paper piecing is at its foundation. It's really about sewing a straight line, following that marked sew line, which is in the pattern. When you do move to FPP, it's getting comfortable with lining up your fabrics as close to a 1/4 inch as possible, as that you're comfortable with, or trimming to that 1/4 inch afterwards if you like to be super careful and have much more than just a 1/4 inch to begin with. It's getting used to that sew, flip, iron, repeat kind of process, and you want to set up that muscle memory. So again, rather than starting from a written FPP pattern, maybe starting with like those early foundation piecers that started with larger scraps of solid fabrics, or on a dryer sheet or an old pillowcase or whatever you might have, and working with, I recommend at the beginning solid fabrics because you don't have to worry about directionality or words, being the correct way, or things like with with cotton cuts, with the bears facing correctly. If you're starting with solids, you can just really work on that sew, flip, iron, and get comfortable with that and covering that foundation edge to edge. So once you've gotten comfortable with that sew, flip, iron, then you can start looking at the different kinds of FPP patterns that are out there. Of course, there's legit kits. Allison Glass, we were talking about earlier, has some amazing FPP patterns of her own, things that she's collaborated with Juicy Juice. There's a plethora of folks out there with some amazing, amazing FPP patterns. But you may want to, rather than jump full both feet in, start with something smaller, maybe just one simple block that you build from there, and you just make that block over and over again as you're gaining confidence, and you can kind of create an entire quilt just from one simple block, changing the colors that you're using, and gaining that confidence to move into a more intermediate FPP realm. So some of the basic, oh, it looks like my ruler disappeared. Some of the basic tools that I like to recommend, starting with what you have. When I started doing FPP, I didn't have, I had just started quilting, so I really only had a ruler, a pair of scissors. I did have a seam ripper because, well, it's a new skill. You are going to make mistakes, but I didn't have anything that was specifically marketed to an FPPer, and that's okay. I actually find myself now, even as deep into the rabbit hole of FPP as I've come, I tend to still reach for my general tools. I don't always reach for my rotary cutter. I don't always reach for my add a quarter ruler. I do with the scissors. I will cut and trim to as close as a 1/4 inch. I will use the ruler to square up my pattern of the section that I'm working on. But I don't always reach for the fancy must-have gadgets, even though I do very much enjoy getting them. But when you're just starting off, you will absolutely be able to start with what, as a beginner quilter, you would probably already have on hand, and not feel like you're behind the 8 ball or you're missing out on anything else anybody else is doing. Right. Things that you can start doing as you're moving from beginner into an intermediate FPPer is that's where you can start adding some fabric flair to what you're doing. Printed fabric, directional fabric, fun fabrics with small tosses are a lot of fun. Ones with words will really stretch your skill to make sure that those line up correctly. Things with like stripes with straight lines, if you're trying to practice lining up and having all the lines going in the same direction. I will say Allison Glass has a lot of fun fabrics to work with because she does do so much FPP, Juicy Juice, those kinds of things. But even the larger scale prints that have a lot of color, where I'm thinking like Cafe, you are cutting those up often into smaller chunks in FPP, but some of those colors and the range of contrast in colors within those pieces that you're cutting smaller can make some amazing visual impact as you're using those in your even beginner FPP patterns. So they may require a little bit more thought on how you're going to be putting them together, and you may end up having to keep working at it and reposition and start building new muscle memory about where and how you will place those pieces of fabric. But the cool different fabrics do add a whole nother, it's just a lot of fun to work with the different colors, the different patterns that you can use, and so it just kind of gives you excitement about that next level. You of course can start upgrading your tools. There are a lot of tools out there that will actually help you upgrade your skills and make things more efficient, make things faster, make things easier. So things like the add a quarter ruler, light boxes, and it's really kind of fun to see how many light boxes are really becoming really popular. Different kinds of threads, specific needles. You'll start to learn about stitch length and what stitch length works for you, which is usually between 1.3 and 1.7. But you'll find the stitch length that makes you comfortable with how you iron. I'm an aggressive ironer for sure. I don't press, so I'm always on the very low end of the stitch length because I don't want to see my threads. But you'll start learning what those recommendations are, and finding out what works for you specifically. But you don't have to dive into the tool pool if you don't want to. Those things are super fun. They can help you with efficiency and things like that. But if you're having a great time with what you have, it's not having those tools is not going to stop you from making incredible pieces of art and great foundation paper piecing projects that everybody's going to love and be excited to see, and they won't know what cool gadgets you had or didn't have. So you don't have to invest in that area if you'd rather invest in the cool fabrics and the things like that. I do recommend, though, always keeping it simple. You don't have to rush into like those. There's so many FPP designers out there that have just incredible projects, from legit kits, from the oh my gosh, of course, now that I want to be able to remember her name, I'm not going to be able to, Judy Niemeyer, there we go. There's amazing patterns out there that will challenge you and will test you and will keep pushing you. But remember that when you're adding all of that kind of complexity, you're also adding more seams, more pieces of fabric coming together. So you're creating bulkier joins. And while I do want you to continue to challenge yourself, if you're finding that it's becoming frustrating and then no longer fun, I don't want you to get to the point where you're just creating more works in progress and you never feel happy to go back to those. So I would say if you're getting frustrated, move back to something that's maybe a little easier, just in that it's not creating that much bulk and it's not adding all those seams, until you again maybe pull it out in a couple of months and try it again and see how you feel about it then. The goal for me is to make sure you're having fun and want to continue foundation paper piecing, not that you get frustrated and never want to try it again. So I want to make sure that you're not diving headfirst into something that you may not be happy with and then say, what did Shannon get me into? This is ridiculous. I never want to do it again. So once you're off and running, that will take far less time than you think it's going to take. You're going to get to the point where you're ready to tackle those challenges. As it just happened, it happened really quickly for me, for everybody that I've talked to, who it's like learning anything. The more practice, the more time you put into it, the quicker you're going to expand your abilities and the faster you'll be able to pick up on new things. But you want to embrace the learning, whether you decide you ever want to do FPP again. But it's definitely something that you've added to your own portfolio, and it's something that you can, say and probably say that you've tried and be able to give clear reasons as to why it didn't work for you, but at least like, and that's always important to me. I want to try in the quilting world. I want to try all the things, and even the ones that I'm pretty sure I'm not going to like too much, which usually has to do with hand sewing for me. But I do want to try it all. Like, I know I'd come in and we were talking about English paper piecing, and that's a lot of hand sewing, and that is something that I've started tackling and doing a little bit of. And so I want FPP to be one of those things for everybody too, to say that they have tried it and can speak to it. But for those that get bit by the bug and enjoy it as much as I do, I would certainly love to want to hear from you. You can always join me on my YouTube channel too, as we start working on all kinds of different FPP projects, both legit kits and, as we were talking about earlier, the 4S collaboration is an FPP pattern. So it'll be unique, different projects for me within the realm of FPP. I guess if I had to wrap it all up in saying what is essential for FPP to me, besides having a machine and an iron and all those kind of things, is I want everybody to remember to be patient with themselves, because if it's something brand new that you're learning, it's something brand new that you're learning, and I want you to have as much patience with yourself as you would with someone else trying something new. I want you to always have fun with whatever it is that you're working on, and when you're not having fun, it's just time to step away for a little bit and come back to it later. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Ask questions of your guilds or your other quilt friends. Wednesdays on Sewing with Stephen and Stephanie, anywhere that you can find community, feel free to ask the questions, and you will find folks that are absolutely excited to share their knowledge with you. And you can always contact me as well. So that brings us to the end of the presentation part, and I would like to open it all up for questions and answers. And I think I can probably stop sharing from here.
It looks like Steely has a question.
Excellent. Hi, Seely.
Hi, Shannon. Thank you for the presentation. It was wonderful.
Thank
Do you have
you.
any finished FPP quilts and things that you can show us?
So I didn't prepare that. I was coming down to see my dad, and I don't have like my setup. So I do not, and I apologize for that. I have my Instagram, and that has tons of the projects that I've worked on, and the YouTube channel, but I don't actually with me have anything. So I do apologize for that.
And
Also, there's a video on your YouTube channel with your quilts.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
A bunch of videos. Yeah.
There. Thanks.
Thank you.
Heidi has a question.
Hey, Heidi.
Hey there. So far, I've done one FPP project.
Excellent.
Okay, now I get to show you.
Yay.
My cow. Can you see my cow?
Hold on a second. Let me change my view and see if I can find you again.
Can you spotlight the cow?
Oh, there we go.
I cannot.
Okay, yeah.
Wait, I think, yep, there we go. I see. Oh,
There
cute.
you go. That's my cow.
Yes.
But what broke my brain was the seams going this away and that away and trying to flip fabric. And I know that you pre-cut-ish some of your fabric before you put it in place. I tried that and my brain was not working that way. I'm geometrically challenged. So I ended up just taking big pieces of fabric that I knew would cover whatever and trimming them to fit.
Mhm.
Do you have any tips on how to unbreak my brain?
Unbreak your brain. I like that. I like that terminology. So for when you're having that those light boxes that I talked about, I don't know if you have something that's like a light box, even if you have a window, and if you tape the pattern on your window that has some good sunlight behind it, and you put your piece of fabric up to it and use a friction pen and draw with a healthy, I would say at that point I would do probably half an inch, if not an inch, around where that piece of fabric is going to land, making sure you're covering the quarter-inch seam allowance at the edge of the piece of whatever paper it is that you're working on, but also the quarter-inch seam that you'll need to add other pieces to either side, and use a friction pen until you start getting more comfortable with that. I will fold the paper. Let me see, I have paper here. I will kind of use that same thought process of using the sun or a light box, and the piece that I want to cover, I will fold on the sew line, and then I will hold the fabric up against that piece with where I'm going to sew. So I know that I have enough fabric over the sew line. So I have that quarter-inch, and then I will use the sun and make sure, and I'll also use my fingers to make sure that I have the fabric covering the entirety of where I'm going to be.
Oh.
Once I flip it, where the coverage you want, when it's folded and looking at you, the paper is looking at you. So when you sew that when you put the paper back up and you sew that quarter-inch and then you flip your fabric over, what was folded down is then in the right place for when it's flipped back over.
Ah, okay.
So it makes a lot of sense in my brain because that's how I've started doing it. But it's also, that was a lot of words. So if you are ever at the point where you're back at some FPP and you're at that part, you know that you can find me and we can go over it for sure.
Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
So we have a question from Kathy Anderson.
Yeah. Hi, Shannon. Good presentation. Thank you very much. I really enjoy paper piecing, and I'm embarking on probably my most difficult project. I haven't started yet, but I don't know if you can see it, but this is the project I'm going to do.
Let me look for you. Keep it up there.
Okay.
I'm scrolling.
Yeah, I'm scrolling too.
Where'd
I
you
think
go?
I was way at the end.
Looking.
That's Tamala.
Here somewhere.
Keep talking, so you light up.
Kathy, your blur
Thunder.
filter is causing it to not show up.
Oh,
Okay.
maybe that's why. Okay, is that why
Well,
I didn't see
it doesn't matter. It's pretty intricate, and
there you are.
yeah, it's just a 16-inch, and it's got hundreds of little tiny pieces.
Yes.
So can you recommend a paper? Most of what I've been doing is just using photocopy paper, but for this, I'm wondering if there's something that's going to be a little easier to remove after.
Sure. So a couple of different things that you can do. If you have photo paper or just your regular, copy paper that you usually use, this is a technique I actually just learned when I was in Oklahoma City. And one of the ladies would take the back of her snips where it was just rounded. She would actually distress the paper, just the copy paper, right on the sew line. She would take her ruler and she would use the back of the scissor and just kind of distress the paper enough so that it was easily foldable, and that made it incredibly easily tearable as well. And I'd never seen that before. And that was a eye opener for me, because for me, my biggest thing is use what you have. And most folks will have copy paper over ordering newsprint. And that's what I've been doing now, is ordering newsprint, because that's one of those gadgets that I'm fully willing to spend the money on because of how many I do. But if you don't want to go to newsprint, and it's a medium weight newsprint, they'll give you a couple of choices if you do go to Amazon for a ream of newsprint. If it's just the copy paper, that using the back of, or even a Hera, is that what they're called, Hera? What that they'll mark for quilting, even using that to kind of score it just a little bit. Some folks were talking about the tailors have a scoring roller, but I have found, I did try that because I had one for some weird reason, probably like my mom's old sewing machine or sewing kit or whatever. And I did have one, but that, when I then sewed on it, it tore the paper out because there were already holes in it, and it just made that, and it just turned into a mess. And I didn't like that at all. So I did not have any luck with that. But that just distressing the copy paper enough in that way was wonderful. And we all practiced it, and we were so amazed by it. So if you wanted to try that out, I would recommend that with just regular paper, and then you don't have to worry about ordering anything new.
Okay, thanks for that. And if I did order the newsprint, that goes through a regular inkjet printer?
Yep, no problem at all. It's the same exact size, 8.5 by 11. They do have like legal size, but yeah, it's a ream just like you would get of like your Staples copy paper.
Okay, great. Thank you, Shannon.
Okay. Sure. Gwendolyn has a question.
Hi, Gwendolyn. Let me scroll back.
Shannon. Thank you for sharing your presentation. I especially loved it when you reminded us that if we are not happy working on a project, we can step away for a while and come back to it later. Thank you for reminding me of that. So my question, I actually have two, was also around the papers and what you prefer to use on the back of yours. And since you touched on some of that, to elaborate more on it, have you tried the tea paper? And do you know the nuances of that, the good, the bad, the ugly, with that side of it? That's my first.
So I've heard of the tea papers. It is not something I've tried yet. So I am not sure about what pros and cons are for that, but I am fully excited to try it out and be able to tell you all about it, because
good.
The new stuff is cool.
Then Then the second question I have is, since you're found yourself so immersed in this side of quilting and you love it so much, have you thought about creating your own patterns, some of your own designs, and going along that path? And can you give any advice, any pointers, anything that you found with that, if you have?
Yes. So funny you should ask that. I'm going to shamelessly pimp out Stephanie and I. We have a retreat that is planned, a virtual retreat planned for January, where I have actually written my very first FPP pattern, and we'll be teaching that in January. And so if you are, and I everybody should try it. It's so much fun. It was so satisfying, and I was just proud. It's the silliest little block, but what I started with was a traditional block that I thought was cool looking. It's by itself as a traditional block, and then figured out how to write that as an FPP block before I ever looked if anybody else had already done it. If they had ever written it as an FPP block, because I didn't want to feel like I was copying somebody else. So I wanted to see how my brain worked it out into what would look good for FPP. And then went and looked to like double check to see if I had made it make sense. And so that was a lot of fun. So if there is a traditional block that you love, chances are there is a way, some people might say, a way to complicate it and make it FPP. But it is fun to like work that out in your head. How would you change it? What would you have to do differently in putting it together versus how it's put together for traditional piecing? And that to me, I think there's value in that to work that out in your head. You may not recommend ever sewing it that way because it is more complicated. It ends up being more complicated, but you might find a way to make it easier because of how things join. I don't know. The hope is, because there are plenty of images that I love, just, pictures of my own pets and things like that, that someday I would love to turn into FPP, but I don't want to, in the same way that I'm saying other folks just starting off with FPP, I don't want to set myself up for frustration and anger so early. So I will probably work on some more just very simple blocks that I can repeat and make sure actually work in the traditional world, translating that into FPP before I start trying to work on too many curves and things like that. But that's in the future. It'll happen. It's just, I'm going to give myself the grace to not frustrate myself yet.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you.
Matt made a comment. He said you could also use phone book pages as well. He says they still get phone books in Tampa. I don't think we have phone books here and around, but if you can find one, I guess you could use those, right, Shannon?
Yeah. And that's the earliest examples of using foundations or were things like that. Phone books, the Sears books that would come, anything easily tear out. That's what people would use. And if you still get, I don't know the last time I got a phone book, but phone book pages, those are great. That's a really good, thin but sturdy medium to use.
And Ingrid has a question.
Oh no, not Ingrid.
Yeah, I've got several. No, I'm just kidding.
All right, grill me.
First, I want to say fabulous presentation, Shannon.
Thank you.
Bravo.
You have to say that. I paid her.
Yeah. But I'm not just here to stroke your ego. So my question is so what are the biggest things that kind of freaks me out when I start a FPP pattern is the organization of the kit. So especially with a legit kit or something of that magnitude, are there some tips and tricks and ideas that you can give everybody that, might be having some of the same struggles?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, because when you do start getting into the kits, and I'm going to assume kitted up Judy Niemeyer's are the same. I haven't done one yet. It is a bucket list thing. It's the same kind of shock of, oh no, what have I gotten myself into, when you see 200 different colors of fabric, and then you're kind of frozen in place when you're trying to go, okay, what do I do next? But if you take everything, so right from taking your package out, just take the paperwork and separate the paperwork, and you're doing it in smaller chunks, and then you're separating. So Legit Kits is an easy one for me to use because it's the one I'm using most often. The way Legit Kits come, all their fabrics are color coded, and they have codes like A through Z codes on them. And so I start off, I'm just looking for all the fabrics that have an A on it. So that's it. That's all I'm looking for, is just fabrics with A. I don't have to worry about that whole stack of all the rest of those fabrics. I'm just looking for A. And I'm just taking it in small chunks. And then I put all my A fabrics together. Or if you are A to Z, you want it every color to have its own space in whatever filing system you're going to use. I use accordion files. You can do it that way. But again, you're just starting with the small chunks. And then when you even start to take again, with Legit Kits, it's a page. It's an 8.5 by 11, an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. And you're just starting with that one piece of paper. And if that piece of paper is cut into smaller individual sections, well, then you're working with even smaller bites. And that's all you have to think about. You don't have to think about potentially the 63 other blocks you have to do. You're just starting with what's right in front of you. And just, I've found staying focused in that, and well, I've also found that with housework. If I just do that, I can get housework done a lot easier too. If I'm not thinking about the 3 other bathrooms I have to do, and I'm just starting with this one, it's a lot easier to get through. So I try to do that in the same way with foundation piecing, is just with what's in front of you and just stay focused on that. And it is so surprising how quickly it goes from this piece of paper that looks like nothing, just some fabric put on it, and then all of a sudden you have this incredible image, and it goes so quickly, even just staying focused on one little thing at a time. So I would say that would be my recommendation on staying organized and not panicking.
Okay. Anne Grant mentioned that Jenny Doan would go to McDonald's and ask for burger papers for it. And Heidi says children's drawing paper or pads from IKEA,
Yes.
which are on a roll, might work too.
I'm writing these down. The burger paper I had not heard of. That's hysterical, and I love that. And I didn't know McDonald's would just give away burger papers.
Well, maybe if you're Jenny Doan, they do.
Steven, can I ask one more question?
Yes.
Sorry.
Good.
Favorite gadget or tool while you're FPPing?
So my all-time favoriteest gadget ever, always, and forever, just always, is the Acorn Easy Press pen. For traditional piecing, for FPP piecing, Stephanie is my dealer of choice of said drug. But I love that for everything. And especially in foundation paper piecing, if I could make each piece of fabric look like it was never its own separate piece of fabric, that would make me so happy. Like that, I would be so excited. And using my iron and the Acorn paper piecing, the Easy Press pen, making sure I'm trying to say that correctly, gets me as close to that as anything ever I've ever used. So if you haven't had the luxury of using that before, you should look into that. If I was going to push any tool, it would be that, because it's not just a unitasker. I use it for everything I do. So like my add a quarter ruler, I love it when I'm using it, when I'm thinking about it, if it's on my table and I'm using it. But if I've put it away because I've been working on some traditional piecing and I don't need my add a quarter, I don't pull it out. I don't think to go get it, because I know I can just use my regular ruler, or I can use, like a postcard that I've gotten to fold back my papers or whatever. So I just don't always think to get the add a quarter ruler, but I always have that pen on my table for everything I'm doing. So it's being used all the time for all the things. So yeah, if I was going to become a pusher of anything, it would be that too.
Okay, so this will be the last question right now. And if people have other questions, they can probably email Shannon about it, or when we're back into the regular session on here, I'm sure Shannon, she's sticking around, you can ask her some more there. But the last question comes from Gail.
Hi, I am starting my, what's it called? The mini series. It's the Outlast Juicy Juice one. Okay.
Yes.
Collected everything. I really dislike a block of the month thing. So I just collect everything, and then at the end, when it's over with, I do it.
Yep.
Okay, this is the one I'm working on now.
Oh, okay, hold on a second. Let me scroll. Gotta find you, hon. Hold on a second.
Okay, I'll keep on talking.
Yeah.
Hello.
See, Gil. No, that's.
There she is. I will highlight her for you. I found her.
There we go. I see it. Oh yes, yeah. Like the courthouse steps.
Yes. Did you do any of these?
I have.
Okay.
I've actually done the courthouse steps in Christmas fabrics.
Okay, great. Now, my question is, I've been looking at it all day long. I have everything ready to go. I just think I'm afraid of it. Okay.
Okay. So if you're scared of it,
Yeah.
especially with the courthouse steps,
Mhm.
nobody and nothing is telling you you have to start with that smallest ittiest bittiest square,
The white one.
the white one in the center. Nobody is telling you have to do that. If you have a copier and you can make copies of the pattern so you can do some practice ones first. And actually with the one I decided to make, I didn't start with that smallest square because I fussy cut. I think it was a reindeer. It might have been Rudolph that I put in the middle, but I fussy cut something and I wanted to be able to see that. And so I probably covered, Ingrid might remember, I covered probably the first 2 or 3 rounds with that square that I wanted to highlight.
Mhm.
And didn't start off that small.
Okay.
That might make you not quite as nervous with the starting of it. I also found that when I was trimming to an 1/8, which is what they recommend, I didn't like the bulk that it was adding. And so I started using a 1/4 inch.
Okay.
So it just seemed to lay flatter across the entirety of the block. So that might
so
also help.
left it like in the center.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I just love this. I just know it's going to be
It's so pretty.
with it. It's just ready, set, cut.
Well, and if you want to start with that smallest square, you also don't have to cut your fabric that small. Your fabric can start off as big as what I was doing. The fussy cut was probably 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches, which is still small, but it was much bigger than that final thing. And
Right.
and you can lay that down, put a piece of lay down a little bit of glue, maybe with the if you have those glue pens.
Mhm.
You could pin it and lower than your first sew line seam. And then as you start trimming for each additional row that you add, you will work that larger square down to where it's supposed to be. So
Okay.
never feel like you have to start off with as tiny as what it will end up being, because you will, as you're trimming and adding new rows, you're working towards making it that shape.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense.
Okay,
Okay,
good.
so
Okay.
that's all the time we have for questions. But as I said, if you have more, you can contact Shannon. She's put her email address in the show notes or in the chat in here for you. And when we're back to the regular session too, I'm sure if you've got some other questions you might ask her then, I'm sure she'll be here to answer them. So thank you, Shannon, so much. Great presentation. It really took a lot of the mystery out of paper piecing. I don't know if I'm still willing to give it a try, but I am going to the retreat that you and Stephanie have in January, and I know that I'm going to get a chance to try it then. So thank you so much for this. This was great. And yeah, thank you.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.